5 years ago, I switched to PR, healthcare communications, and I had a kind of a funny moment when I made the switch because, as I said, I spent 13 years writing stories every day, sometimes 8 stories a day, and that was my so-called strength. And a colleague goes, "Well, great, help us help other people learn what a story is." And I froze up. I didn't know how to explain to somebody else what a story was. I intuitively knew what one was based on writing them every day and knowing what headlines would work, but it was hard to extrapolate that for a broader audience. So I spent a lot of time thinking about what is an actual story? How come when I hear something, I know instantly this will be a really good, compelling piece to tell somebody versus most of the pitches that you hear from companies that don't have that interesting nugget to it. So this deck is based on that experience. This quote really speaks to me. It's on my business card because throughout human history, stories have been what has helped us advance. And if you think about it, you can show somebody all the data you want, but people don't remember data or statistics. They remember stories. So this quote, "The shortest distance between a human being and truth is a story." It resonates with me a lot. I majored in classics, Latin and Greek. I think about Homer's Odyssey. This is the real Battle of Troy took place in about 1200 BC, and it was told for 400 years, that story, before Homer wrote his version down. So imagine your grandparents coming back from World War II. They tell you about their experience in the war, and you tell your grandkids, and on for 400 years, and then that story gets written down. And there actually is some truth to it. That was a surprising thing. We have the Odyssey, and then we started doing archaeology about 100 years ago. We dug up and we found there was a lot of the parts of the story were actually true. So it goes to show the power of storytelling. There's actually a scientific basis for this as well. There's a period in human history where we went from being more of the Stone Age to start developing art and religion and philosophy. And the question was, on a scientific basis, do we have a genetic change where our brains all of a sudden could comprehend these abstract ideas, or was it a expansion of some other way? And one of the latest theories is that basically it was stories. We were, before a certain point, we would learn a new skill, but we didn't have enough population groups to transfer that skill from village to village. But as our populations grew, we could then tell the story to our kids who could share it with other generations and other villages. And that's how our explosion of knowledge really came about. So just by way of background, and why I think stories are important, and again, the science does prove that out. So I want to also talk about, this is the wow memo. And I pull it up because it's really important to put a wow on your data and to point out to people that maybe aren't in your field, or even people that are in your field, but maybe unaware of why this is exciting. So this document is, it was recorded in 1977. It's based on the telescope that was looking at the stars for radio signals. And there was a brief blip when we had this amazing outburst of energy that we recorded. And it was so unique and so different that the researchers certainly said, wow, was this aliens basically? Now, if you didn't have the wow and the red circle, what would you take away from this? Probably not much. I mean, it's just a sheet of numbers. Maybe you'll see that the 6, the E, the Q, the U, the J, the 5 are different than the regular 1s and 2s and 3s up here. But in general, you would know that's exciting. And the way that I connect this back to the healthcare industry is that I had a client a couple of years ago at JP Morgan, which is the big healthcare conference in San Francisco. It's like the Super Bowl of healthcare. All the investors are there, pharma's there, analysts are there. And my client was going to do their first presentation. They really need to impress investors. They're a public company, their stock had kind of drifting down, and they needed to be memorable. And we were going over their deck, and they had a sheet of their patient outcomes. And it was a really, their drug's amazing. It's not immunotherapy, but it helps the body recognize cancer and expel it from the cells. And they would take the sickness of sick patients, people that had failed 5, 6, 7, 8 drugs, and would cure them in some cases. So it was a really remarkable drug. Personally, I really became a believer in the company and wanted them to succeed. So they showed me this Excel spreadsheet of numbers, and they just wanted to put that up there. And I said, well, I don't want to hear what this says. It says, you know, trial 1, patient 2B, and there's a list of numbers. And they said, well, you know, these are patient success stories. And the analysts, they're all physicians. They'll know it. They'll look at the sheet and understand that. And it wasn't obvious to a person that wasn't seeing that data. So I said, well, do you actually have any actual patient stories? And they had somebody that had a huge tumor in his arm. It was so big, it took up the whole arm. He was gonna lose his arm, we were gonna cut it off, it was so big. He went on this drug, and then 2 weeks later, it was gone. They had a scan of before and after with this massive tumor, and it was gone. And I said, put that scan as your first slide, you know, show that. And even if it's only an anecdote of one patient, that people remember that, you know, 6 months to a year later. They love the idea, that was the plan. Unfortunately, the lawyers got to them and they decided to pull it, and you know, they went with just the sheet of numbers. And as I was sitting in the room watching the presentation, you could see they were losing the audience. You know, it was 8 o'clock in the morning of a busy day, and people were just sort of not really paying attention or taking notes. So it's just a cautionary tale that, you know, it's important to put a wow on it. So, you know, Beyonce says, put a ring on it, put a wow on your story when you look at your data. So what a story is simply change over time. It's the, you know, you start off with an idea, you have some successes or failures, and then you have an end goal in mind. And this is the way that I think if you break down structurally what a story is, it's not just a fanciful anecdote, but it has a real structure to it. This is what I try to help people understand that, you know, when I wanted to be anyway, coming out of college, I wanted to write fiction novels, and I would get really serious and write my journal every day and try to write books. And what I realized was I was good at describing scenes, but not at telling stories. I realized this years later, because I didn't understand what a story was. But in reality, when you're talking to reporters or investors or anybody else that you're trying to convince to believe you emotionally, it's important to think about, you know, where are we today? What are the ups and downs? People love hearing about how you try multiple things that don't work, and that how those failures, you know, maybe an experiment or a trial, led you to your current version of what you're working on. And then you tell them the ideal state of, you know, imagine if this was successful, then we could cure something or help people change how they act or sell hospitals a new service. And so again, you can think about your story as an XY graph. And this has been proven out over time. So this is a big data report on stories throughout history. They analyze basically tens of thousands of stories, different cultures and history, and all stories have very similar curves, these 6 curves. So this is the bottom left corner is, say, for fortune. Up to the top is their happiest moment. So if you think about someone like a Cinderella, you know, she's on the middle up top. She's happy, her dad's alive, he goes away, he dies. She's poor, she's lonely. She goes into the dance, amazing, gets married at the end. So, you know, these are very common arcs. And I bring that up because that same story can be applied to what you're working on. You can plot out the ups and downs of your career, your company, even your drug or your patient journey or your customer journey. You can plot that out in this type of graph and then tell that story when you're sharing with investors or meeting. This is another sort of a summary of those curves. And again, it's, you know, the man in hole, boy meets girl, from bad to worse, which way's up. I probably would avoid from bad to worse unless, you know, you're talking about the customer journey and how they have no other solutions except for yours, which is going to be coming out and changing their lives. But again, kind of the way that the journalists think about things. And I found this again myself when I think back to my reporter days. When I would talk to a company, I was intuitively listening to these types of things. I wanted to hear what they were working on, but not so much, you know, we're perfect, we're successful, no one else is like us. I wanted to hear wow, we've overcome a few challenges. We had our first experiment failed, but then we noticed something different. We changed what we were doing, and now we're on the way up in this path forward. As entrepreneurs, you probably know that there's no clear, straight path to success. It's very challenging. A lot of entrepreneurs make the mistake of wanting to hide that from reporters, journalists, not hide it, but just not talk about it, because you don't want to seem like you're failing or struggling. But for media, I think it's important that they understand that, this wasn't born a perfect idea, that there's been challenges along the way, and again, the change, the delta of your fortune is what makes a compelling story. Now, as a business journalist, I look at stock charts, and this is how we really thought about stories. So if Bloomberg, if a stock dropped or rose over 5%, they have to write a story about it, and have to figure out what happened that day. So this is Juno. They were one of the first companies to come out with an immunotherapy. And this chart, they were one of the highest IPOs in the biotech industry when they launched in December 2014. They had some early success with patient trials showing great results. At one point, the FDA put a hold on their trials because they had a patient death that was not being related to the drug. And then once that was cleared, they went back up, and they had other issues as well. But again, as a reporter, you're looking at, okay, the FDA put a halt on their trial, the drug, the stock dropped. Can they get back to where they were before? Or they're the highest IPO in biotech this year. How higher can they go? What will challenge them? So that's sort of the mindset the reporters are looking at when they look at a company. So the couple elements that every story has. Every story has a hero, the journey ahead, which is again that delta that I was talking about. So what? This is the important part. There are a lot of interesting anecdotes about what you may be working on or your patient or your customer journey, but you need to put it into a context, and I'll talk about context later, but giving it a so what for most audiences. So even if I don't know anything about what you do or not in your field, giving me a context and a reason why I should care. So we're trying to help people with a rare disease. We're trying to connect people in new different ways to help them change their behavior. Or we are developing a technology that will allow for medical samples to be collected in a new different way. You can make that, I was thinking I could even sell you a shit sandwich. We have a company in JLABS in Houston that's working on a way of collecting fecal matter, right? It's not a very sexy topic, but the point is that this is a guy, entrepreneur, who was in the hospital. He heard from a nurse that they have trouble collecting microbiome data because every hospital, every patient collects it differently, so the samples can get validated. So he's working on technology to help standardize how you collect basically poop. Now, most people probably wouldn't care about that, but there is a really great so what there, that if we could collect microbiome samples in the same way across different hospitals, we could potentially get a lot more drugs coming out of that are microbiome based. So what that matters, even though you're collecting fecal samples, you are helping the hospital industry and patients by standardizing an approach that has no standard right now. Sorry. So beyond so what, it's good to have at least one detractor. So, if you're in a new space or a new approach to something, it's always good to talk about not the opposition, but the types of things that might stand in your way. So, well, look, where it's a new approach and the FDA has never approved this type of medicine before, or there have been 10 companies that have tried and failed in this space. It gives, again, the reporters a sense of it's not a perfectly clear path forward. And I think, again, it helps because it gives a sense of the challenges that you're facing and what you will overcome. Another thing, this is harder to sort of work into your story, but tension and conflict. That there are people that maybe disagree with your approach. It's related to having a detractor or challenge ahead, but a lot of times I have these stories at Bloomberg, and my editors go, there's no tension or conflict with the story, we can't run it. So we always have this thing called the to be sure graph. So, this company has a great approach, everything's great. To be sure, others have failed, or this one researcher says it's not going to work. Just a heads up that that's something that people sort of look for when they do a story. And then a light at the end of the tunnel. make sure you tell me your end goal, your desired state of not just your company, but also your customer. Who's the end customer? What is the desired state? You're helping people, again, overcome disease, or you're helping people connect in different ways. There are multiple things you can say as light to tell them, but it's good to put that end goal on the XY graph so people can understand that when you talk about what you're working on. So here's some examples. The hero of the story, your story, could be a couple of things. It could be you yourself, your personal journey. It could be your product or your drug. It could be your patient, your customer. So here's an example of the drug itself being the hero of the story. This is immunotherapy, and the story is in the New York Times about how basically this drug sets the T cells after cancer. And it's a fascinating story. This approach was first written about in ancient Egypt. There's the idea that basically one famous Imhotep noticed that if you made an infection on someone with a tumor, sometimes that patient would get healed. What was happening was they make a cut and then they infect it, and they use this as a way to realize that there was cancer in the system and then kill it. Flash forward to 1900, there was a famous scientist had a similar approach. He noticed that people who were sick and also had cancer, they had a cold or something, but sometimes the cancer would go away. So he created a thing called Cooley's toxins, which is a mix of different bacteria that he would infect his patients with. There's a great story in the New York Times from, I think, 1905, saying that this doctor cured 400 people of cancer. And he didn't know why it was working, but he just knew the connection. But he couldn't replicate his trials, and so chemotherapy and radiation came out, and this approach was forgotten until the 80s and 90s when we started realizing we could maybe interact with the immune system differently. So that's the journey of our approach to using the immune system to fight cancer. It was, 4,000 years ago, it was noted, kind of fell to the wayside, it popped up again in 1900, went away, and now it's up and running again. You can also, again, you can be the hero of your story. This is the former CEO of Onyx. He sold the company to Amgen and moved to Boston and had the startup working on Alzheimer's. Really impossible hill to climb, right? There's so many failed approaches from big pharma, and here's a guy who's in a startup trying to cure Alzheimer's. So you, as a journalist, you can see that there's a long road ahead. It's fraught with challenges, lots of detractors saying you can never do it, but you have this very personal story of this guy who was successful in the field already, and now he's taking on a new, different challenge. So again, that applies to your story. You can fashion the way you talk about yourself in the same way. You had success in one area, and now you're trying to replicate that in a new area. This is the patient as the hero of the story. So again, you could be working in a really new area, and you can talk about how people, your end customer, don't have many options, and their journey is often fraught with all kinds of challenges. And so what you're trying to do is to bring them a new solution that will help them get to their desired state. So again, that's a way of thinking about how you pitch or tell your story. Who's the hero? Is it you? Is it the product? Or is it the customer? And it can be all three. You can change it depending on who you're talking to, but these are different ways you can deploy that story. And this is one that came out about J&J and JLABS a couple years ago. They can still be beautiful. So basically, it's the notion that how can pharma act fast? He has this big Herculean guy with a big stone on his back. But it talks about how we launched JLABS to tap into what you are all doing. How do we, act like a startup, even if we're not a startup? So this is the company as the hero of the story, basically finding a new way to be fast and quick. So we broke down the essential 3 questions we ask people when they're trying to tell a story. We have a system on our website that helps you answer these. But basically, what's the problem you're trying to solve? That's a great question that, if you can answer that question, gives people a sense of what you're working on. And then how is your solution different? So what are you doing? And then what is your approach? Why is that different than what's been tried before? Is it improvement over previous attempts? Is it completely new? And then why are you passionate about this area? This question may seem a little out of left field, but what we put it there for is because a lot of people in healthcare in particular have a connection to the industry where they have a family member or themselves with a particular disease or indication, and they have a real reason why they're doing it. I mean, I think, a lot of the healthcare is not a quick turnaround like type industry where you can make money in 6 months to do a video game, it's a little bit longer time frame. So a lot of people are going to be more passionate about it, and that story really does help fuel a lot of interest in coverage. So we tend to put these up on featured residents. So we ask the companies to submit the 3 answers to those questions in 1 or 2 sentences, really short, and then we will put it on display. Here's one we have from Intuitap. So, the problem they're trying to solve is they're trying to improve the accuracy and efficiency of spinal taps at girls. And currently, they're form blind. So basically, it's just somebody, sticking a needle in your back without actual insight into what's under the skin. Their solution is trying to do real-time imaging. So, you get the landscape of what they're trying to do, the challenges that, people have really painful or maybe misguided epidurals. Their solution is, the desired state is real-time imaging. And the passion is that there's a lot of people, again, that are suffering from these painful injections. And, it's really frustrating for our doctors as well. One of the questions that, if you're trying to think about what you're working on, how to describe what you're doing, is this question of, so what do you do? When you walk into a hotel lobby or an elevator or a bar or a restaurant, and someone goes, what do you do? I think in the scientific field, a lot of people tend to want to unload, with like 50 years of history of, well, in the 50s it was chemotherapy, and then there was this and that. And as a reporter, I experienced a lot of times I would just ask a company quickly, what do you do? And for 20 minutes, they would go on about the industry, and I would lose my attention, unfortunately. And I talked to a lot of people who are really to grab up front with a real quick, sort of fast way of describing yourself. And so I think, one way to think about it is, I love this site. It's a Twitter handle called Roll My Thesis. So basically, people will, submit a one-liner for Twitter about how they describe their thesis. Because they're all working on important interesting stuff. But if you describe it to people as a thesis headline, it's, it doesn't make sense to anybody. It's not the field. So here are just a few examples just to think about how to translate what you're working on to a very basic, way of people's interest. So prediction of perivascular drainage of AV from brain using computational modeling, implications for Alzheimer's disease. Honestly, I have no idea what that means. I know for Alzheimer's, that's not it. Translates to your brain is too far away from your heart. So, it's, if someone said that to you, again, hey, what do you do? Well, I'm studying how the brain's too far from your heart. What? I want to hear more. You got my interest. So development and evaluation of an adolescent chronic restraint stress model of depression in adult female rats. Again, not really clear. I stuffed young rats into frosting cones and asked them how they felt. They were sad. Antibody medicated radionuclide targeting of HER2 for cancer diagnostics and therapy. Very tiny nukes can reduce cancer in plastic dishes in nude mice. Structure function of studies of the AIP survivin complex. Proteins are little shits and are not to be trusted. So this is a fun little exercise. But think about, if you only have 140 characters to describe what you do, you're all working on, I'm sure, complicated stuff across a variety of topics. Think about the guy, collecting food samples in Texas I talked about. It's a topic you people won't be interested in, but you can do it in a short, funny way that will get somebody's interest. And again, that applies for investors through the venture capitalists and the media. You need an investor for the first time. You tell them something that's like on the left, they're not going to remember you. But you say on the right, they laugh and they get that next. What does that mean? Tell me more about it. And that's sort of the goal. Here's another one. We're going to that story, but okay. So once you get the sort of the headline that I call the punch in the face of like what you're working on for your audience, it's important to put it into a context that people understand. So again, as a reporter, I was always thinking about where is this company in the space of what they're doing? And you can break this into another grid. Are you, from a little competition to a pilot field, from a novel approach to a validated approach? Are you working on something that is totally new and no one's ever done it before, and it's a whole new field? That's way over here. There's a company we have at JLABS in San Francisco working on an approach to Alzheimer's, where they think there's a potential connection between infections in the brain and Alzheimer's. For the past 100 years, we've identified Alzheimer's as being related to the plaques in your brain. We've had drugs that can reduce the plaques, but it unfortunately does not lead to better improvement in cognition. So the latest theory, recently, is that the plaques maybe aren't the driver of the disease, but a function of infections getting in the head. And then when your brain recognizes the bacteria there, it puts plaque to solidify, close it off from affecting your brain further. So the plaque is not what's causing the memory loss, it's the brain's overactive immune system trying to kill these off, the infections. Yeah, really new, may not work, but it's exciting, and given that we have nothing else that seems to be working, it's an interesting approach. So that's novel, there's not many companies doing it, but it's interesting. Moving up the crowd a little bit, microbiome. There's a lot about the microbiome we still don't know, but there's some fascinating studies that connect everything to the gut-brain connection, to gathering food samples, to the acne treatments. So we have companies across the board at JLABS and at J&J that are trying different approaches to all kinds of conditions. And so it's a private field, but it's not very validated yet. But again, that's an interesting story. So we're still trying to prove what this could do. There's a lot of competitors out there in different areas, but we think we have the right approach. That's sort of how you tell the story. CAR-Ts. So cognitive field and it's validated. Something like 300 trials right now of companies trying to use immunotherapies for cancer. Very crowded field. It's hard to stand out in that field. So if you're trying to tell your story, say ASCO, which is the biggest cancer conference in the world. There's a company out of China last year called Legend Biotech, and no one ever heard of them. They released data, they cured 8 out of 10 people, and it was all of a sudden everyone knew the company. J&J ended up acquiring it for I think $1 million back in January. So that's how, one example of how a company that sort of comes out of nowhere, out of the field, in a validated field, can sort of win the news cycle. Difficult to do without being further along, but that's another example. And then this last one is, there's a lot of drugs out there that it's an old field, there aren't many competitors. This is actually the drug that Mark and Charlie did, was basically took a drug for, being sold for $10, acquired the company, it was only $800 because there's no competitors, but it was a very validated field. So not that you want to be that story, but that's an example of a validated approach in a very low competitive field. So again, think about how to tell your story. There's some aspects when once you figure out what your story is, who the hero is, what the challenges are, what the context you want to tell people about, how do you go about telling it? As I mentioned earlier, a lot of companies made the mistake of when they were talking to me of wanting to give me the full breadth of the industry. So they started at the top of the pyramid, and then half an hour later, they get to what they're doing, what their approach is. Think about it of reversing that triangle. Give me the headline first. I study meteorites that fall from space. I'm taking something, I'm trying to change the way people interact with their cell phones. Give me that punch in the face headline. Give me about a few minutes of just, how basically if you're in a challenging space, if you're a new space, if you're a private space, you have an approach that's different in some way, and then you sort of back into the bottom of the pyramid of, we'll walk you through why people haven't been successful so far. I was at a conference in LA a few months ago, the Milken Conference, and there was a speaker talking about how audiences really like to hear 80% of the problem being discussed and 20% of your solution. I haven't heard it broke down on that before, but it makes sense. I think as thinking like a reporter, it's interesting to hear, we've been trying for decades to do X, and there's been 10 approaches, but none of them have worked. We think ours is different because of this reason. So maybe I want to start with that detailed background, but I think it's fascinating to hear, it's companies also, on the other side of being too much on the bottom of the pyramid, they also try to say, we have the best approach, there's no competitors. That's not interesting to a lot of reporters. They want to understand that the context of, I see the potential curve of your story, and I see that there's some challenges or hurdles that people have failed in the past, and that your approach is different in some way. So it's just important to keep that in mind when you're telling your story, that it's good to give that background at some point and describe the problem that you're working on, why it's so difficult. So people can understand, wow, I didn't realize people couldn't solve this problem for so long. Your approach could be a potential new way forward. One way that I'm thinking about this is we are working on a vaccine for dengue fever. The problem with dengue is that it pops up all over the place and it's different every time. So you have to make a new vaccine for every time that pops up, and it's really impossible to predict where it's going to pop up or how it will mutate. And so I was thinking about doing a web video where you see red dots appear, and it would say, can you predict where the next dot will appear? If you can, you can help save lives. Because in humanity, we can't figure out where it's going to happen. And I think people like to solve puzzles in general. So again, think about the context of your problem you're trying to solve, and giving people that background of needing a new solution for a challenging field. Also avoid buzzwords. One of the mistakes a lot of companies make when they talk to reporters or get investors is they kind of run through key buzzwords they think will matter to people. And so you can run off a string of buzzwords that you think they're signaling that you're sort of in the know or appropriately placed in the field, but because so many companies use them, it ends up being meaningless to a lot of people. So just something to keep in mind, if you look through maybe your competitors or other people in your field, press releases, you'll see a lot of these same terms being used over and over again. I can share some with you guys later. Be open with your audience. There's a great scene in the movie Wolf of Wall Street where he's doing a sales presentation at the very end of the movie, and he's going around the audience, he's handing a pen, he goes, "Sell me this pen. Sell me this pen." And the person looks at the pen and goes, "Oh, the pen, it has good ink." Next person. "Oh, the pen, it has a gel finger holder." No, not interested in me. The key is understanding what your audience wants. So, if you're trying to sell me this pen, you need to give me a reason to want to buy the pen, not tell me the features of the pen itself. And that's the same for when you're telling your story to your audience. So maybe you're talking to a journalist that covers a particular sector of the field, and they only cover startups. Talking about, if you have a history of doing startups, and be more interested in them than would be talking about how you help, you approach something that no one has done before. Or if it's a consumer-facing outlet, you want to talk about the customer journey. Our end desired customer has no options for X, Y, Z, or they have too many options that don't work. We're trying to give them that option. So it's important to think of the context and also what your audience is listening for. And then finally, be authentic. We talked about telling stories. It's important to be true to who you are and what you're doing. You certainly have to make people excited and want to buy into what you're working on, but make sure you don't tell a lie, because obviously, if they are interested in something, they're going to do the research and find out it's not true. So just, be sure to be authentic and really embrace who you are. I think a lot of reporters don't like talking to people that are so corporate and so buttoned up. They want to hear about your weird eccentricities, the things that you like to do. And there's a great reporter, Chrissy Farr at CNBC. She's at Fast Company, and she loves talking to scientists because she's like, look, they're so knowledgeable about one small field that I can think about. Most journalists know a little bit about a lot of different things. But if you come to somebody that with a really deep knowledge about one thing and you're passionate about it, that comes through, and people want to talk to you and engage you more about that. So that is all I have. Any questions? Great, well, I'll be here all day today and tomorrow, so any questions, you want to follow up, my card's in the front, let me know. Ryan, thank you so much.
Hi everyone, my name is Chris Lally. I handle communications for all of the different JLABs. We have 10 locations now across the globe. And typically, I will give this media training to resident companies only, but we're opening it up to a broader audience now. And let me just start by asking, how many of you have actually spoken to media or are accessing to the media or plan to? Okay, so only a few of you. So let me just run through quickly, why would you want to spend time speaking to the media? Now, how many of you are in startup companies? Okay, great. So, why invest the time? Why do we want to do it? Really, it builds reputation as a thought leader for your company or for anything that you're working on today. If it's your thesis or it's, specifically if you want to get your company in front of the media and the press. It builds relationships for future media opportunities. And, typically I like to say that if you do a press media interview, don't expect that, you're going to get coverage that first time. It's always good to meet with a reporter, talk to them, and maybe down the road they'll have a story even if they don't write about you that very first time. And it also helps educate your target audience in legal matters. This, for instance, or some of these publications on the bottom are the ones that we typically get into at J&J. And you always want to kind of take a look at which publications are going to hit an audience that's going to be best for your company. So I think Brian covered a lot of this about what are the elements of a good story. Timely or relevant to industry trends, something that has broad market appeal. I think by the nature of what a lot of the companies here at JLABS are working on, they do have a unique angle. It's typically something that has never been worked on before. It's brand new, so people, the reporters are going to be interested in that. And again, a lot of the things that Ryan talked about previously are going to be very helpful. You want to have some striking visuals if you can. I mean, people need to just hear you talk about your company. They want to see something. You want to, they like commentary from key opinion leaders. And you talk about sound bites. Again, Brian talked about telling the story. So you want to really tell a little bit of that personal story as well. They want to hear why you're passionate. Again, Eva talked about, what are you doing? How are you doing it differently? But really, why are you passionate? Almost if you start with that really sucks people in right away, and the reporter will be interested. So a lot of times I go through the do's and don'ts with people. So, you assume anything you say can't end up on the front page of the New York Times. If you're in an interview, everything is fair game. So, just always remembering that. So you really want to have your key points down. Think about that story, about what are you doing, how are you doing it differently, and why are you passionate about it. And just be sure that you have those points because you want to come back to those frequently during the time of the reporter, because typically you have to tell them things a few times for it to sink in. So repeating message points, using facts and statistics to support your messages, and again, telling that story or anecdotes really make it a lot more interesting. Some of the don'ts. You don't want to reply no comment. Sometimes the reporter will come in for the kill on that. So, you don't want, it's really, I've seen it happen where say, well, I really can't comment on that. There are ways to get around that, and I'll go through a few of those in a moment. You don't want to lie or guess. It's fine to say, hey, let me check with my folks on that. I don't know, I don't have that information at my fingertips, but I'll be happy to check on it and get back to you. And get back to them quickly. Because typically they're on the deadline, so you just want to make sure that if you promise you're going to get them something, get it to them as quickly as possible. Don't assume that anything is off the record. They say, oh, come on, this is off the record. It's on the record. Anything that comes out of your mouth, I always say to people, can show up in print. And typically, if it's something that you don't want to show up, anything that's off the record, that would be the first thing that they start the story with. So it's just things to think about. I mean, the stories that most of our people have to tell aren't anything that's so, controversial. I mean, it's controversial in that it's new, but it's not controversial in a bad way. So sometimes the reports give you silent treatment, so you don't want to. People think that they need to fill the space sometimes when the report is being quiet. And that's when you'll tend to maybe ramble on and say a little bit more than you should be saying. So it's fine to just stop and, let them take their notes, and you stare down with them, but obviously they're not there to waste the time, they're gonna ask you another question. Answer your question, be succinct, and then kind of move on. Don't worry about them asking you the same question 2 or 3 times. It's fine to say, hey, as I mentioned before, this is what we're doing. And don't repeat negatives, because typically, again, that's something that will show up in print. So this is some of the ways, just during the interview, to kind of keep things on track. You might want to bridge from one area to another. It's fine to say, hey, that's not my area of expertise, but here's what I can tell you. And you go back to your 3 key points or the things that you want to talk about. So just always keeping in the back of your head, here's what I want to talk about. If they're going down a path you don't want to go down, rather than saying, oh, no comment. Say, hey, that's really not my area of expertise, but hey, I'm going to tell you about, here's what I can tell you. Or, it's fine to say, hey, this might be internal information, or we consider that to be internal business information. But again, here's what I can tell you. So it's just really validating and then bridging back to, your messages, getting your point across. Steering is kind of the same way as well. As using phrases or transitional aids to control the interview, and make your point. Sometimes things will get a little off track, the reporter wants to go down a road you don't want to go down. Say, hey, that's interesting, but just as important as that is what we're working on today. And tell them what you want to tell them. So it's really just always keeping control of the interview. Flagging again, this is probably the most important. So this is where you talk about your key points. Sometimes what will happen is you can go through an entire interview and they've asked you 25 questions and you haven't said anything about what you're working on, or you haven't gotten your point across at all. So, sometimes at the end they'll ask you, is there anything that that we haven't covered that you'd like to tell me? That's your opportunity to tell them everything you didn't tell them previously. Or, if they don't ask you that question, say, well, let me make one final point here. And then you can kind of go into your key messages. So again, it's just some ways, and it's always good to kind of have this in your back pocket or review it before you have a media interview. Typically during an interview, it's just good, it's good to check in with the reporter, ask them, hey, did I answer your question? Is that clear? Sometimes, if they're not taking notes, a lot of times these days they will record it, but if they're not taking notes, they're probably not going to write anything. So if they're taking a lot of notes, that's great. And you might also want to pause and just let them finish taking their notes, rather than just keep talking. So, the more they write about it, that they take notes on, probably the more likely you're going to get an article. And I like to just remind people, don't let the journalists put words in your mouth. Their job is to write about the facts. So if they're going to say, hey, would you say that this is what's going on? That's hearsay. Everything has, their job is to focus on the facts. So, just something to be aware of and not get into that at all. In-person interviews, it's always good to make eye contact with people. Again, getting the time to take notes. If you say you're going to follow up with stuff, again, do it quickly. And I tell people just to be careful not to display your meeting materials, because I've had a lot of executives here at J&J, because sometimes, they'll have your notes in front of you, or they'll have them, and you don't want to leave them on the table if you have to get up for some reason, step out of the room, because of course, take a look at that. And sometimes it's like, don't talk about this, and then of course you come back, and that's the first thing they ask you. So it's just good practice not to. I mean, if you're doing a phone interview, totally different story, and you can have all of your notes, books and papers out in front of you. Just be sure you use the landline. Don't talk faster than the reporter can take notes. Checking in with them is going to be important in this case. If they ask you again multiple questions at once, and I've had this experience with, of course, where they'll ask you 4 questions at the same time. It's like, okay, well, let me answer the first one. And, let them come back and ask you the other 3, because otherwise it gets confusing, and sometimes your story becomes a little bit muddled. Make sure you're in a public place, encourage another person possibly to be in the room with you, because that way you can bounce off with somebody else or one of your colleagues, or, they may be able to slip you a note at this, perhaps talk about that. And then, of course, leveraging the results. So, externally, typically when you get a story, what we do is when we come on here at JLABS, we will put it on social media. Sometimes we link to it on our website. We have, for those of you who are JLABS folks here or resident companies, we have a lot of email blasts, so we'll put it in an email blast. And you can also use that type of thing in presentations as a proof point for, you can cover in publications. Internally, we also have a lot of different newsletters that we use and we get report out. So, that goes to our senior management, and we have a lot of different portals that we have at J&J. So there's a lot of different places that we can, for the resident companies, that we can help get that news out as well. So that's all I have for these. Are there any questions that any of you have? Yes.
Sure. How do you get into the door to have thesis
That's a good question. So if you don't have, if you don't have a PR firm, you may be a small company, you can't really afford that. If there's a particular publication that you want to target, the best way really is to think of what that story is and then maybe write a short pitch to them. I mean, I know, it's kind of difficult because typically that's the job of the PR firm to go out there. I worked on the agency side for almost 20 years, and that's what I spent all of my time doing. So really, it's making sure that you're at a specific point where you're ready to talk publicly. And typically, if you have some news, if there's a press release, that's where you're announcing maybe, hey, this is our initial funding, or maybe it's a Series B. The press is going to probably be interested in that. So you want to have some kind of a big milestone in your company. Yes, yeah, and you can definitely do that. There are a number of different services that will actually post press releases. So like PR Newswire, and there are some ones that are a little bit less expensive because sometimes PR Newswire can cost a lot more, but there are options now to get the word out. Yes.
Hi, I'm with an organization called Clinical Trials Ontario. One of my sort of goals is kind of telling the stories of clinical trials and the good things that they bring to the province and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Easy to do in Boston. Hi. So talking about telling wonderful stories of health innovation and whatnot. Easier to do in Boston and San Francisco. You have more of an appetite here in Canada. We just like to complain about our healthcare system a lot. So if you look at the Globe and Mail and Star and things like that, you see a lot of negative stories, but we'd like to tell some positive ones around the amazing things happening in biotech ecosystem here Would you have any tips or advice about trying to get stories like that into major media outlets?
Yeah, I mean, typically, I see a lot of those publications are looking for stories like that. I think the reason that they're probably covering the things that are so negative is because they're covering just, here's what's happening today in the industry. You have to actually bring the stories to them. So, again, it's identifying, who, which are the target publications you want to go after. And if the organization, do you have somebody who handles public relations or who, no. Okay, so, yeah, so again, it's really, when you have some results that are really positive, that's when you kind of take a look at, okay, well, what publication would we want to put this in? A lot of times, we hit a wide variety of different publications at J&J. So if we have news about new companies coming on board, it's typically going to go in some of the, more of the trade publications. But if it's something where, somebody's secured a significant amount of funding, then that's probably going to be more a business type publication. So it's just kind of thinking, and I would say in your case, it's probably going to be more the first one, where it's some of the publications that are coming from the healthcare industry. So kind of taking a look at who's writing about this stuff, who's written before about results or positive results from a study. And that's somebody that you can be like, hey, we just completed this study and we've got some interesting news, would you like to chat about? I mean, if you don't have somebody who's doing PR for you and doing that specifically and making that call, then, it's fine to reach out and, see if you can get some interest from them to talk to you.
Hey, Chris, I'm gonna add that real quick. Sorry. So the thing too also is thinking about influencer relations. So even if your goal is to get an article in the paper, it's important to think about the audience that might also care about your news. So maybe you don't have clinical trial results or funding even. If there is a patient advocacy group that you can work with to tell your story, because journalists will go to advocacy groups and say, hey, I'm looking for startups here interested in. Tell me about what potential solutions are in the works for patients. So that advocacy group recommends you to a journalist. That's one way for validating for a third party. And also trying to get media, don't view it as a transactional relationship where I talk to you once and you write a story, like Chris said. But think about who is in that person's sphere of influence. So as a reporter, I would get emails all day long pitching stuff. I never opened the email. It's like going to your spam box and responding. You never do that. But if in the morning I saw 3 or 4 people that I like on Twitter talking about a topic, I would open the company and go, oh, I see some people are talking about you. What's going on? So think about non-traditional journalists. If there's a particular researcher or an advocacy group or a thought leader, or even someone else in that field that's active on social media, that's one way to also get that conversation going about yourself.
If you've got good work or a project that's happening kind of continuously over time, is it useful to strategize around creating an event or a launch or something that happens at a moment in time that makes the thing more reportable?
Yeah, definitely. And I think we do that. For instance, next week we'll be opening a new JLABS in New York. So, that is, for us is a milestone. It's the 9th one that we're opening. We have 10, which we have at the 10th that'll be opening next year in Shanghai. But so these are, typically we have a number of companies that are coming in. So at that particular point in time, the media is typically very interested because you hit a milestone and you're announcing the new location, or it may be that you've been working and you're securing funding for something. So those are all milestones.
Yeah, I mean, having an event getting a big turnout is difficult when you're a smaller company. Even for a big company, we had an announcement at Bio last week, and we weren't sure at the last minute who was going to show up. And so a lot of reporters now rather have the release or news under embargo, and then publish it, and then do a follow-up story, and then going to a press event, because they're under such tight deadlines, it's hard to go somewhere and then publish a story from your seat. So just something to keep in mind, maybe you should approach media by giving them, hey, we're gonna have news next week. If you can agree to the embargo, I can send you the release or the news. And that way you can get multiple reporters covering it. So the mindset of the reporter is, well, I don't know if this is really newsworthy, but I know that she's sending it to my competitors too. So I don't want to be the only person not covering it. So able to do 2 paragraphs. So yeah.
My name is Andrea. I work with the Vector Institute, and we deal with artificial intelligence. Highly complicated. You talked a little bit about trying to simplify your problem statement, but are there any sort of tips or tricks that you could offer on condensing something that is very complicated so that, for example, if you're trying to convey that to a reporter who may be listening for a certain thing, doesn't, hear it a certain way and then oversimplify it in their story, or just misinterpret it entirely?
Yeah, one of the challenges in being a reporter is people either expect to know a lot about something, and if you don't want to be the person who's like, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're saying, and sort of ramble on sometimes. But I would just always start with simple and say, at a basic level, we're doing X. And, now what that means in terms of the technology is more complicated, but in a high level way, because what the reporter is listening for is that headline. What it's like their editor doesn't know anything about that space. So when he or she tells their editor, oh, I got a really good story about whatever you're working on, they have to explain it in a very basic way. So it's never feel, the need to get over detailed at the very beginning. Again, you have to catch their attention real quickly. Again, there are a lot of stories that I work on where I understood the topic really well, and I just couldn't get story proof because I couldn't simplify it in some way. So, it's important to have that headline in mind, and that's the reporters looking for. When they're listening to the story, like, how is this going to improve somebody's life? Even if they're not going to say in the headline how your approach is different, just that high statement up front that interests them.
Yeah, that's also interesting because we've just been working on AI. We're starting a new health site at JLABS. So we've had to do the same thing, kind of learn, well, what is blockchain? What is AI? What's the Internet of Things? How do they all fit together? So that's, so we've had to try and simplify that and learn about it at the same time too. So.
And I'll be around after, so if you guys want to do one-on-one sessions, I really enjoy simplifying complicated topics, so come find me somewhere and we'll figure out, the stories.
Okay, one more? So I paid attention when you said the closest distance from the human to the truth is the story. And here is a caveat. In science, many times science contradicts directly the common sense. Mm-hmm. And your audience would go for the common sense, right? Makes sense. But probably one should put a flag there in those situations.
See, that to me is the story. So if you told me, common sense tells you that this is the straightest path forward, but through quantum physics, it's actually going there and then there first. That would make me interested. So it's the whole headline about man bites dog, right? Common sense says it wouldn't happen, but because it's so different and unique, you as a reporter want to cover it. So it's important to point out that this is the opposite of what you might think.
Okay.
Or,
And then for, I am really, how can I say, I have a question about how we bring to light very important issues that are not, that would be, the government job. I am appalled by the lack of scientific education, understanding, and I have seen some of those stories about people not vaccinating their kids or the useless supplements that bring millions to people, and nobody asks any questions. So that could be the realm of media and education. So I wonder, it seems to me that this would be a big the role of the government, and they are actually, they are too laissez-faire. right? They don't want to be the bad guys. They want people to be happy and vote for them. But actually not doing their job is very dangerous. So any advice about how to handle such a campaign?
We're trying actually ourselves to be champions of science. We recognize the problem as well. And, I mean, I have smart friends that are hold those positions, about vaccinations. And it's unfortunate, there's only so much you can do as an individual, but at least when we go to events and when we put stuff out, we always tag hashtag champions of science. We want to basically make it fun and cool for kids to see science as something that's important. From the media, unfortunately, there's been a lot of changes in the industry. There's a lot fewer people covering it. When I was at Bloomberg, we went from having a whole team, people covering pharma, to just one person, and from a team covering biotech, just one person. So it's, there aren't many people that are actually looking at science. Doesn't mean that you can't tell a good story or an accurate story, but yeah, I think it's important for all of us to, like I said, own your geekiness. If you are a scientist, make sure that people understand that you're doing things really important for society, and it's a valuable point.
Okay, we have a question from the webinar. What are your thoughts on storytelling and PowerPoint slides? Meaning, do you believe slides help or hurt the delivery of the story?
Well, since we just bored you with PowerPoint slides.
It depends on who you're trying to sell. So, again, as a reporter, if someone said they want to pull out a slide deck, I would roll my eyes. So it's, just tell me your story. I do think it helps to have it. Some people are more visual learners, and so if you have a slide deck that talks about the story, but unfortunately, we have the same problem at J&J, is that slide decks tend to be basically Word documents on slides. It's not very compelling. No one ever reads it. So I personally, I've been trying to do more TED-style talks. There's a couple of books out there. There's all kinds of information online. So if you are trying to do a compelling presentation, the general key is to focus on one big stab per slide and a really great image. You can find images free online, something that speaks to what you're trying to prove, and then a big number that pulls out like 50% or whatever it is. Because if you have 20 numbers on there, no one's going to read it, and you're not going to see the wow factor, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation. So you can find lots of resources on how to tell TED-style talks. It's really valuable to think about how to visually tell a story, but I don't think it's necessary all the time for most situations.
I agree. I definitely just make it more visual. Fewer words, the better. You do need to have a few to kind of explain what it is, but obviously we're talking here about Facebook and Twitter and the different ways that you can leverage results. And so visually, at least it makes sense. And I could have had just those two things up there and spoken to just the two circles. So that's.
Okay, great.
I think you would someone to have no slide meetings.